onions in this heavy bottomed, this is a non-stick pan. I'm going to add a kind of good dose of oil. So what a lot of people do is they tend to, oops, excuse me, ping. Don't want that to ping. So what a lot of people do is heat up the oil and then add the onion. Now, technically speaking, that's not the best thing to do, because what happens is that your oil is hot, you throw in your onions, and the outside of the onion cooks first and the inside doesn't. So if you're going to cook it all together and heat it up all together, then you actually end up with it cooking through uniformly. So this is actually going to take a while now to heat up. Sorry, I've got my kitten staring at me. This is hilarious. You can't see her. I can. She's kind of looking at me going, what the hell's going on? Okay, so I'm going to heat that up. I'm going to start frying that through a little bit. What you can do with the onions as well is just add a kind of sprinkling of salt, because that will kind of draw out the water a little bit. Like I said, this is a really kind of heavy bottomed pan, so it's going to take a while to heat up. Okay, so that's starting to heat up nicely. Like I said, that's about kind of 110 grams, I think it was, of onion. But I'll write the recipe, so. Some people prefer to hand chop the onions, other people prefer to whiz them in a blender. It depends, I'm going to be honest. If I've got small amounts, which rarely happens, I'll hand chop them. If I do kind of large amounts to portion up and put in the freezer, I might blend them. I don't like them too fine, because we quite like the ragu chunky. So that's the onions that have started cooking now. I'm going to add the carrot and the celery together. I'm going to mix that in. May have to add a tiny bit more oil, not really sure. Okay. No, I think that's good at the moment, fairly well. Now, I started off on fairly high heat. I'm going to bring that right down to a really low heat. I'm going to let all that kind of water evaporate. And I'm going to leave that now every so often. I'm going to give it a stir, but I'm going to leave it for, I would say, kind of good 20 minutes. So the whole kind of process from heating up the onions in the oil and cooking your celery and carrots normally takes me between about 25 to 30 minutes. I mean, it obviously depends a lot, again, on the type of pan that I'm using, but this is the one I kind of use for the kind of larger amounts, and it does take a while to heat up. So I'm going to leave that to cook through now. What we're kind of looking for is a kind of really beautiful creamy consistency. The pancetta. So like I said, you can use bacon as long as it's not smoked. You don't want to kind of ruin the flavours. This is, as you can see, this has got quite a high fat content, and that is what is going to give it its flavour. So pork usually means flavour, and fat usually means flavour. I don't know if you've seen Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat with Sami Nosrat. It's both on Netflix as a documentary, and also there's the book. And her whole quest for pork and flavour actually takes place in Emilia-Romagna, because this is kind of one of the kind of porky capitals of Italy, certainly. Then I've actually got pork, sort of ground pork. It's the fat content, I'm going to be honest, I can't remember off the top of my head what the fat content is of this. But I'm kind of guessing it's about probably a 10%, maybe a little bit more. So this is still kind of cooking and simmering. And like I said, we kind of want to get to a really beautiful creamy consistency. Then I've got my beef. So like I said, this is a 600 grams of beef. This is fresh. 5% fat content, as you can see. It's actually really lovely and lean. So there are very few restaurants in Bologna which don't use pork. In fact, I think there's only one or two in their ragu. So sometimes when I have clients coming who don't eat pork, it can be a bit of a challenge, I'm going to be honest. You know, they want a ragu without pork, and so I don't really have a kind of large selection of restaurants that don't make it, or that make it, sorry, without pork. So my throat. So can you see this is actually starting to look really lovely and creamy now? I might kind of speed this up a little bit. Actually, no, it's not too bad because it's kind of cooking on a wide bottomed pan. Especially, you know, if we kind of use a kind of much narrower saucepan, then it might take a little bit longer to cook. But one of the things to kind of look out for in terms of texture, I don't know whether you can see these kind of sort of little bubbles, sort of creamy. It's really kind of looking creamy. You can't see the oil separate to the vegetables. When you kind of start getting these kind of little kind of white bubbles, then that's starting to be done. And like I said, I cannot, you know, recommend highly enough making a really good base. And the other thing I said before as well, this is just fantastic as it is as a pasta condiment. You know, if you haven't got time, just throw your kind of celery out, carrots and onion in a pan, leave it to cook a little bit. You can add a tiny bit of wine if you want, but then just toss it on your pasta, or toss your pasta in it more than anything. And also here in this area, it forms the base for a tomato sauce as well. So here they don't really use basil in tomato sauces. So all that kind of use of herbs is more southern Italian, to be honest, rather than northern Italian. Here it's all about pork and pig fat. One of the things I do use, and this kind of depends on the amount of tomato that I have around, is tomato puree. So I do have about kind of a good 2 teaspoons of tomato puree there. 2 tablespoons. Might add a wee bit more depending. I use tomato polpa. This is from Mutti. It's a very, very famous tomato product producer. I don't know whether you can see that, but I honestly think they're from Parma. So you know, I need to be kind of faithful to Emilia Romagna as well. And I mean, they are considered one of the best, certainly in Italy, and they have Italian tomatoes and really, really, really good products. So you can see this is all kind of blending together now, starting to get really lovely and creamy. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to put in the pancetta first. And that is going to, I'm going to turn up the heat in a minute. I'm going to put in the pancetta so that it releases all those kind of beautiful flavours. Then I'm going to add the pork. So I'm going to go in terms of fat content. So the highest fat content first, then use the pork, which has got less, and then I'm going to add the beef. So, you know, we kind of release all those beautiful fatty flavours first, or porky flavours. Another sip of wine. More wine for me, less wine for the ragu. No, that's not true. I did portion out my wine. Right, I think we're always good to go. I would actually quite like to turn on my, what do you call it, extractor fan, but it might kind of interfere with the video, so I won't. Okay, so I think we're kind of fairly good now. The carrot is kind of getting quite soft. The celery is definitely nice and soft, as is the onion. It's the carrot that usually takes a wee bit longer. No, this is actually quite soft. So actually the way you can tell whether it's ready is whether the carrot breaks quite easily when you know, when you try to push it. Actually this piece doesn't. Yeah, that's squishing that. Okay, yeah, that's squashing the carrot. So yeah, alternative, press down the piece of carrot that you want to kill. That one doesn't want me, that one doesn't like me at all. But the other ones that I'm using, yes, they're getting quite squashed. So I think that's ready. Okay, so that's lovely and creamy. I'm going to turn up the heat now. Add my pancetta. My ex-mother-in-law actually uses a bit of sausage, pork sausage. And that's kind of her granny secret, which I probably shouldn't share, but you know, you talk to purists. I mean, there's this huge debate as to, you know, what kind of should go in a ragu and what shouldn't. I mean, like I said, there is the official registered Chamber of Commerce version, which is very, very similar to the one I'm doing. But they put milk in and cream at the end. And I'm going to be really honest, with all the restaurants that I've worked with and the grannies who I know, not one of them actually puts cream in or milk. Some put a tiny shot when they're loosening it to heat it up. That, yes, but not actually in the original version. Okay, so that's actually kind of cooked through now. So I've got all those lovely porky flavours and all that fat that's released now. Quite high. Oh. So I'm going to break that up. This is my ground pork. So the kind of ragu benchmark in my house, I'm going to be honest, is set by my son, who's 15. And grew up with his very Bolognese nonna. So when I was weaning him, I used to, you know, stay up. I was working. I had, you know, a still kind of full-time job, and I was working. I was preparing all this food for him and putting it in the freezer and giving it to his grandma when I used to take him in the morning. And I'd kind of go and pick him up and I'd say, oh, you know, did he eat his food? And she'd go, oh, yes, yes, yes. And then I kind of discovered that she was feeding him, you know, ragu at 7 months old. And she's one of those nonnas who, when I used to leave him, especially when he was older, you know, we'd arrive and she'd kind of go, right, darling, what would you like for lunch? And he'd go, Nonna, can I have tortellini with in cream, and can I have a cotoletta? And there she would go. She'd stand there and hand make all the tortellini, especially for him, and the cotoletta. Okay, so a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people actually say to fry up the meat separately. I actually prefer not to, and the reason is for the flavour, because you get all those beautiful porky flavours and all that fat released first. So, you know, really cook it through properly. The prep time on this, the total prep time, including preparing all your ingredients, is about an hour. Okay, I'm going to be honest, it's not quick. But after you've prepped it and cooked it through, and I mean prepping in terms of, you know, cooking all the meat and everything, that's, you know, that's included in all that time. Once that's done, then you kind of just leave it. I would suggest you do it in the morning, especially if it's a rainy day. I'm going to chop up these bits of pork and just leave it to cook. So my kind of average simmering time is about 6 hours, 7 hours. The Bolognese nonne, the grannies, say that when the ragu is ready, it calls you. And that's actually true. So the smell completely changes. All of a sudden, the smell in the house just changes. And it just becomes sweeter and kind of richer. And you're like, oh. Once upon a time, they used to have these beautiful wooden stoves or wood-fired stoves, which kept the house warm at night. And they used to put the ragu on in the evening and take it off in the morning. In the old days as well, one of the reasons it was cooked so long was because they were using kind of poor cuts of meat as well. Okay, so my finger's starting to go numb now. I'm going to turn up the heat on that. Leave that to cook through. It's really important not to rush this bit, because this is what actually makes your ragu taste amazing. Take your on all that meat now. Again, don't rush it. You don't want to rush it. We've got time. We need tender, loving cares with all things. That down a little bit. That's kind of completely browned through now. Okay. Okay. So my meal pie actually took a bit less time to cook because I've got my larger based pan. And I don't have a massive amount. It's actually kind of probably half the amount that I usually do in one go. So that's really nicely browned through. I'm going to turn up the heat now and add my wine. And I'm going to add my wine on the outside so that it doesn't stop the meat from cooking. Okay, I'm going to turn it up really high now, so we can get all the alcohol. So once the wine is heated up and the alcohol evaporates, then we can start mixing it in. Might just add just another tiny little bit of wine. Yeah, why not? You know, stop me drinking it. Ah. So leave that to evaporate. Kind of really boiling away now. I'm gonna mix it in with my meat. Wait for that all to evaporate. Like I said, wait until the wine has heated up to mix it in with the meat, because otherwise you don't want to stop the meat from cooking. And like I said, put it on the outside of the pan and not right in the middle. Can you see the liquid's actually evaporated quite a lot now? Okay, that's good. Again, don't rush. You don't want to rush. We've got time. I might add a little bit more tomato paste actually. This is a triple concentrate. Add a bit more tomato. So that's like about 2 tablespoons. No, I did say it was 2. I said it was 2 before, but it wasn't actually physically 2. Right, okay, so we're cooking that through. Again, don't rush. In Italian, sometimes you have what's called a ragu bianco, which means a white ragu, which means a sauce which has a meat sauce, which has no tomato in. Okay, I'm going to turn the heat down on that now. stuff down those bits of meat. Okay. So now I'm going to put in my tomato. I'm going to mix that in. So some people actually put in broth. I don't have any. You can if you want. It kind of intensifies the flavour a little bit. But I would be honest, you know, rather if you put in fresh homemade than a stock cube. Don't want to ruin it with, you know, all those chemicals. Okay, so I'm going to turn the heat up on that a little bit again. So I've taken my tin, I've put some water in my tin, can you see? And I'm going to add that to my ragu. Okay. I might add a little bit more water. So I would say another kind of tin of, altogether, it's another tin of water. So 1 tin of tin tomatoes, 2 tablespoons of tomato concentrate, so triple tomato concentrate. Again, that is my nitty. Can you see? Nitty. You can get that in most supermarkets abroad as well. Like I said, it's my favourite, and you know, I live in Emilia Romagna. I try to support my local producers. Oh, just for the record, I have not been paid by Mutti to advertise them, okay? This is my own personal choice. So no Mutti advertisements, no payments, no money has exchanged hands at all. Okay, so that's now happily boiling away. I'm going to turn it right down, and I'm actually going to move it to my back burner, to the burner at the back, which is a little less intense. And I'm going to now simmer that. I'm going to check on it every hour or so. If it starts to get really dry, I'm just going to add a bit more water. And I'm just going to leave it now for about 6 hours. That's kind of usually my minimum, I'm going to be honest. I'll check in on it kind of every so often, like I said, about every hour. Tagliatelle as well to eat that with. But if you don't have those, that's fine. Choose, like I said, a pasta that has that contains, so anything with kind of holes, so shells, or farfalle, which have got the folds, or penne, which have got the holes as well. You know, anything that kind of, you know, that will kind of scoop up the sauce is good. So I'm going to leave that to simmer with the lid on. I'm going to move that to the back here, there. And I'm going to turn off my middle burner. I'm going to turn on my back burner. And I'm going to just leave that to simmer. And check up on it every so often. Okay, so here I am checking in with my ragu. This has been on now for 4 hours. My son usually kind of arises from his fortnight, whatever he does, fightings, expeditions, stuff, and usually wants to taste around now because he can usually smell it in his bedroom and goes, Mummy, it smells really nice. So that's what it looks like at the moment. I'm going to leave it on for another couple of hours. I think I'm going to add just a tiny bit more water, but not very much. I'm just, like I said, I'm checking on it every hour or so. So can you see it's kind of starting to look quite thick? There's that kind of film of oil on the top. Can you see just there, which is what we're really looking for. Some people in Bologna actually like it really dry. My family prefers it a bit juicy, if you like, so they like it a little bit wet so that it really covers the pasta when we cook it. Okay, I'm going to check in again in a couple of hours. Okay, so we're at 6 hours now. I think I'm going to switch it off because it's actually quite thick. It's got this kind of juicy bit on top. I personally don't like it too dry, and people I feed generally don't like it too dry either. So I think I'm going to leave that and cool it down. And then I'm going to portion it up and put it into the freezer. And just for the record, if you do portion out your ragu, you normally count 2 heaped or 2 big tablespoons per person. So you would heat up your ragu and then boil your pasta and then throw your pasta in the ragu and mix it up. So don't do that thing where you boil the pasta, put it on the plate and then plonk the ragu on top, because then it doesn't cover the pasta. Okay, hope that's kind of covered the ragu for this, for the kind of lockdown. And good luck, and if you have any questions, then just send me a message.